How is Perry's Bridge integrated with the transatlantic slave trade and Bristol? The question that really engaged us was who was Perry, and in what ways was he involved in Bristol during the transatlantic slave trade? Perry was a slave and a personal servant who lived from 1752 to 1798. Perry was born in the West Indies and was just 12 years old when he was first bought from Joanna Jones by John Pinney on Nevis in the Leeward Islands for $115 sterling on the 4th of July, 1765. Perry was Pinney's main servant at Mount Ravers plantations. Perry and Pinney had a closer relationship than other slaves and their owners at that time. In fact, Pinney even took Perry on his honeymoon in Philadelphia. Perry was trusted to walk around town by himself and not try to escape. Therefore, Pinney would allow him to deliver important packages for Pinney's business. He also joined Pinney on his trips to neighbouring St. Kitts, where Perry's sister was training to be a seamstress. Pinney moved back to London in 1783 and brought Perry to live in his family home in Bristol and work there alongside Frances Coker, a free maidservant. They lived in today's Georgian House Museum. Their relationship, however, did not withstand. Perry assisted Pinney on his business trips to Nevis. However, on attending the second trip, Perry's attitude was poor and lazy, so much so that Pinney's family wanted him to be discharged. Not being discharged, Perry continued to live and work in Bristol. In May 1978, Perry grew ill and weak and died on the 12th of November at Ashton, the place he was sent to for a change of air and to recover. Pinney, however, wrote that this was a great relief to the family in a letter he wrote to James Williams, his plantations manager. This information demonstrates how Perry had a hugely significant and memorable role in Bristol's history in the transatlantic slave trade. By naming the bridge after Perry, Bristol is not only acknowledging Perry's story, but also paying respect and remembrance to all the slaves, similar to Perry. To understand Perry's background more, it is important to look into the life of John Pinney. John Pinney was a rich sugar plantation owner and slave owner in Bristol. He inherited several small plantations on the island of Nevis in the Caribbean. In 1764, Pinney went to Nevis to view the plantations and noticed that many of the slaves were too ill or old to work to a high standard. To solve this, Pinney freed the slaves and hired new slaves for seasoning. This meant that the new slaves had a period of 3 years to which they were eased into their work to get used to it. 66 slaves were brought to the plantation from Africa, mostly children. The slaves produced on average around 7,250 gallons of rum a year. Pinney believed that working the slaves to death was not the way to thrive, as he realized that steady amounts of work was much more effective and efficient than overworking the slaves and getting mediocre results. Not only this, but Pinney provided medical care for his slaves, land aside for growing their own food, and presents of clothing. This, in his mind, was giving them incentives and motivation to serve him, as they were not being treated cruelly. He even quoted that the manager must not use severity, for I will not suffer any human being, committed by Providence to my care, to be treated with cruelty. However, it is important to consider that Pinney wasn't just doing this to be nice. If visitors saw that the slaves weren't being treated cruelly, then they are less likely to campaign for the ending of slavery, and this meant that Pinney would continue to make profit on his plantation. Perry's Bridge was constructed in 1999 and formally opened on the 16th of March, 1999. It is a pedestrian footbridge spanning Bristol's floating harbour and was named in honour of the 18th century slave Perry Jones, who was brought to the city to work for a wealthy sugar merchant named John Pinney. On its opening, it was officially recognised as a monument to the city's slave trade. The opening of the bridge was attended by over 200 people. This led us to dig slightly deeper to explore the history of the bridge and to understand why it was Perry in particular that was chosen to be honoured in the bridge's name. When going further into this rabbit hole, we found there was little reasoning for the naming behind the bridge. In fact, many people do not know that the bridge was named after Perry, as there is little visible information on the bridge itself about the history of Perry's life and how it came about that the bridge was named after him. This is because the plaque for Perry's Bridge is a foot away from the bridge on the ground, so quite out of sight from any tourist walking over the bridge. The plaque resembling Perry's legacy and all the other enslaved lives have been neglected and left to fade over the years since the bridge's opening in 1999. There have been many campaigns calling for the replacement of the plaque or to provide an information board presenting the detail of the history's bridge for the many tourists that visit this site every day. Therefore, the lack of signage at Perry's Bridge brought us to ask questions such as, are there any other memorials for the thousands of slaves' lives lost during the Bristol slave trade located within Bristol? The only memorial located in Bristol to honour all of the enslaved lives that were exploited during the slave trade in Bristol is this plaque shown on the slide. The plaque is located on a brick wall outside of the M Shed. Although thousands of people come to visit the M Shed and walk past this statue, it is not very visible to due to its size and location. The M Shed is a popular tourist site, especially now since Colston's statue is now residing inside. This is ironic, as Colston, a wealthy white merchant who was a key player in the exploitation in many of the African lives in Bristol, had a statue and memorial for him, whereas this plaque is the only monument in memory of all the innocent African people involved in the Bristol slave trade. Who constructed the bridge? Google search showed that the entire cost was held by the Arab group, who held the entire cost of the bridge and were responsible for the construction. It appears that they had no input on naming the bridge and that the decision was down to the local council. Arab Group is a privately held company, so we can assume that it was financed entirely by private borrowing. Today, many people know the bridge to be an integral part of the harborside and a popular meeting place, as it connects all of the attractions around Millennium Square together. On Tuesday, March 16th, 1999, Perry's Bridge was officially recognised as a monument to the history of Bristol slave trade. As mentioned, over 200 people attended the dedication of the so-called Horned Bridge, which spanned St. Augustine's Reach, which Home Officer Minister Paul Boateng said was a symbol of the struggle to end the slave trade. At the event, Mr. Boateng said, "The bridge does more than span a stretch of water. It's a bridge which helps us to span time and come to terms and understand and confront our past." It can simply be said that this comment resonates with many locals in Bristol and represents the opinion of the majority. In addition, the presence of other authoritative figures at this event, such as the Dean of Bristol, reflects the significance of the bridge within the community of Bristol and the dedication of the council in representing the victims of the slave trade. There are campaigns for the current love locks, as shown on the picture, to be removed from the bridge, and an information board to be put up that highlights the story of Perry Jones, the wider slave trade in Bristol, and the recent history of the Colston statue to educate the public on a trade that built Bristol using the profits of slavery. This shows that there is still controversy within the city over the topic of slavery, and Perry's Bridge in particular. Some people view the bridge as a symbol of historic suffering, whereas others view it for its literal value, a passage to be able to cross water. The meaning behind the design. The bridge was designed by abstract sculptor Ellis O'Connell and fashions a unique design with two horn-like structures that are the counterweights for the lifting section of the bridge. However, this distinct feature holds no link to Perry himself, nor the slave trade in Bristol. This suggests that no thought was given to including Perry during the construction stage, but rather an afterthought after construction had already finished. The name was suggested by Paul Smith, the chair of leisure at the time, to commemorate the slave trade in Bristol. Some have gone as far as to call the naming tokenistic rather than a true acknowledgement of Bristol's past, as well as being condemned as gesture politics by Liberal Democrat councillor Stephen Williams. To an average onlooker, the bridge is not only noted for its abstract design and abundance of padlocks found on its railings. The link to Para and Bristol slave trade is unclear and is only highlighted by a single plaque located a distance from the bridge.